Hey there, good people. This week we have been focusing on teachers and their students, and I really enjoyed this week's readings because, as myself being, as I am a high school theater arts teacher, this was really helpful this week. These readings were. Um, First, I just want to start off by saying I love the way that these chapters were written. These essays were written because they were very easy to grasp, not easy to grasp, but very I was able to read them fluently, and they were very self-explanatory. So I'm just gonna go through a few things that stood out to me in my video. So first, looking at our first reading, one thing, the change exercise. I love that exercise. I'm always looking for things from our class that I can incorporate into my high school classroom. And I'm always thinking about, like, as I read these exercises and, I'm picturing them in my head and how they may go in my classroom, like, how can I simplify them and make them, doable for my students. And I really like the change exercise. So the exercise that I'm referring to is the one where she talks about each actor was given a piece of text with which to work from a play of the instructor's choosing. When it was that participant's turn, he or she stood up and began to recite the text as neutrally as possible. And then when our teacher said change, the actor was to drop the text and seamlessly begin talking about an important personal experience until she said change again, and then the actor would return to the text. This really stood out to me because, one, I'm always trying to get my students to be more personal. That's something that's kind of been like a reoccurring thing throughout this course in my videos and in my discussion boards. Like, how can I make my students be more personable? Because that is not an easy thing to do in a high school classroom. Also, with students that, of course, we've talked about this, that always are, in their phones. Or, they have a different way of communicating than we do because they are mostly in tune to social media. So, how can I recreate these authentic and personable experiences in the classroom to where they feel like they don't always have to rely on that as a part of communication? And I think this exercise is very personable. Having the students reciting the text and switching from the character to themselves, back to the character, back to themselves, and it eventually becomes where they are the character. I appreciate that type of exercise. I think it is something that can be built upon throughout my year. Like, it's not just like you do it once and then that's it, like, this is the experience, but I think it's like a building experience. So it's something that an exercise that you constantly come back to, and like as time goes on, students get used to it. So I really loved that. It was very I love the way it was written. It was very easy to understand that exercise. um yeah, so my next thing was hold on, let me get there. The multiple choice acting. So, one, that is just a, a beautiful way um, to describe what the author meant. Multiple choice acting, like, there are so many different things that you can rely on to bring to a character. You do not have to focus on just one thing. And I think I get caught up doing that myself. I do this monologue called the banana monologue for my student. And it's basically about a young woman walking down the street, and next thing you know, she's eating a banana and she gets cat calls from these construction workers. And she like eventually she goes on a rant to them about, like, oh, you love this banana so much. And then she takes it and she smashes it on her face and covers her face with the banana. And in that monologue, I noticed that eventually I start off as like cool, calm, and collected, but then I eventually end up pursuing anger. and that's like my one thing in that. But the this multiple choice acting section made me think about, like, in my own performances, and how can I do that differently to where I'm not just using the trait of anger to portray that character. How else can I bring that character to life? Because it actually delves deeper, um that monologue does, into the topic of, like, how toxic masculinity, let's just say that. So how men view women in everyday life. So how can, just the multiple choice acting really stood out to me and made me think about that, and how I can, rework that monologue myself, and then have my students use that as an example. So the multiple choice acting really stood out to me. um uh Another thing this week, my group theater paper was a beast. But one, I just enjoyed learning about different um people that were a part of the group theater, other than who was brought to our attention, and how they worked throughout it. And so studying the African American, um an African American actor, Canada Lee, I love that because um essentially you don't actually think about African American theater during that time in these types of spaces. So that was really cool to learn about, and all of his contributions, and that he actually worked one on one with Lee Strasberg and other folks of the group theater. I really enjoyed that, researching that and learning about his contributions to the group theater. Um, and lastly, I'm going to touch on our second reading, where it is stated, concentration is the key to what has been loosely thought of as imagination, and how that's central to Lobdell's. I think that's how you say it. How that's central to Lobdell's argument. Yeah, because we've been thinking about imagination completely different up until now, but realistically, that's all that imagination is you heavily concentrate in your own mind, and you see where your mind can go. So we don't think about the concentration part often, and how that you know ties into the acting. So I feel like concentration is very important, and starting off with that relaxation component helps concentration, because if you don't start off relaxed, then you won't be able to concentrate. So I can remember back when my very first show that I did in undergrad, that I worked on as part of my crew assignments, I was running crew for Medea. And so I remember watching the performers do their prep. And, in that play, there are many, that play is driven by rage and anger. And then being able to articulate that into their words. So, like, watching it just makes me think about the performers and their prep work. And I, just remember they all started from a point of relaxation, and we were like, even if you had to relay a message to them right before the show started, anything like that, as you were doing our times, like 5 till places and things like that, you could not bother them. And it's like, I realize now, because the prep work was so important, like that relaxation and that concentration was so important to what they were about to bring to their audience. So yeah, this week's readings were great. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed all the different exercises and learning about new things. So yeah, those are my takes this week.